So yeah, today I'll be analyzing my games from this GM Norm event that I played over the weekend. So the schedule is a little bit weird. Basically, the first four games were this past weekend. The first one was on Friday, two on Saturday, and one on Sunday. And the next five games of the tournament are going to be this following weekend. So one on Friday again, two on Saturday, and then two on Sunday. So we have this like break in between. I believe the schedule is basically to accommodate for players that were like working during the week. And so, okay, it kind of makes sense just to play on the weekend and then you get the weekdays off rather than 5 days nonstop. So, yeah, I figure I'm going to be going over some of my games. Hey, Cheslad, thanks for following and letting me know that my alert box was misplaced there. And yeah, I'll be analyzing my four games tonight from this weekend. Also, in about half an hour, I'm going to be doing game analysis from one of my Patreon subscribers. So it'll be the first time I'm doing that. So we'll see how it works out. But I think it's a cool idea. I feel like game analysis is just not really being done enough. But it's super instructive, like both for the person getting their game analyzed and the people I think watching the analysis really get something out of that as well. So stay tuned for that. That'll be in about a half hour. But I'll just start with one of my own games for now. This was from round one. I was playing against FIDE Master Eugene Yanayt. And I've played Eugene a couple of times now. So I was not born, but I was raised in Southern California. And a lot of the players in this tournament have been playing tournaments in Southern California for years. So I've played a lot of these players a number of times already. Eugene is one of them. I think we've played like maybe 4 or 5 games at this point. And so I'm pretty familiar with his game. And I was playing black. He went for d4. And for this tournament, I didn't really do any kind of super special preparation. Rather, I just took it like one game at a time. And for the most part, I've been playing my main repertoire. So here I stuck with the King's Indian. And this was actually a really interesting game to prepare for because I don't know if anyone's a King's Indian player in the chat, either with white or black. But Eugene plays the King's Indian himself. In fact, he's been playing it for much longer than I have. And we've played a lot of the same lines together as black. And hey, shout out to Gormally Fan Club and Flying Sheep, thanks for subbing. But Eugene also plays these lines for white because he's a d4 player, as do I. So we're two players that play the King's Indian basically with both colors. And hey, Gormally Fan Club, thanks for subbing. I actually haven't realized you've subbed for 6 months. That's amazing, much appreciated. So we're both playing the King's Indian. And he goes for the classical line with bishop e2, which I've also played with whites. So basically we've played this position with both colors, but only one time against each other. The first time we played this, I was actually playing white, and he played e5, I castled, knight c6, d5, knight e7, and I think I went for b4 here, the bayonet attack. And I basically got crushed in this game as white. I think I got checkmated in like 25 moves. It was like my first time playing this type of position, like this kind of Mar del Plata situation where black is like attacking on the king side and white is pushing on the queen side. And I just had no idea what I was doing, and I just got mated very, very quickly. Okay, so for this game, I'm playing black this time. That game I was playing white. I didn't really want to go for these lines with knight c6, mainly because this is what my opponent plays as black. He doesn't really play so much the lines with knight bd7 or knight a6, which I have played and are also possible. So he has a ton of experience with this knight c6 line, both as white and as black. And I felt like it was just a bad idea to go here, because my opponent would just have a ton of experience in these types of positions. Okay, so I wanted to choose one of the sidelines, and I picked c6. And I think this is a pretty interesting move order because he castled. This is kind of normal. I played e5 here. And now I'm basically going to be developing either the knight to a6 or in some cases to d7, maybe based on what white does here. And I don't want to give away too many move order secrets in case I want to reuse this opening again. But after the move he plays bishop e3, which seems like the most natural move, black is actually able to kind of trick white here and go for e takes d4. Knight takes d4 and rook e8. And what we've done is we've actually transposed to a position from the Gligorich variation. So this will only be interesting to like d4 players, but hopefully the rest can can bear it. But basically, if black goes for the main line here with e5, instead of castles, there's a move bishop to e3. And here one of the main lines for black is to play like e takes d4, knight takes d4, let's say rook e8, f3, c6. I'm not sure exactly about the move order here, but if white castles, and we essentially get the position that we get in the game, then black plays this move d5. And theoretically, this is supposed to be pretty decent for black. Kramnik won a famous game against Jan Gustafsson in this line, which I think is definitely worth checking out. Okay, so this line is basically, I think, quite decent for black. But the point is, let's say white castles here, which is what my opponent would have done if I went for this. If I go for e takes d4 in this move order, rook e8, white plays f3, black goes c6, then there's no way he's going to play bishop e3 here and allow this d5 move. Instead, I think the theoretical move for white is king h1 here, and there's a lot of theory. White is supposed to be slightly better. It's definitely playable for black, but this is not exactly the position I would want to play. I actually generally don't like these positions with the weak pawn on d6. They're very playable, but you have to be a certain type of player to be able to handle this position. And I would say white is probably slightly better. I would definitely prefer to be white here. And I've had this position with white a few times. But with the move order in the game, what has happened is after e5, white played bishop e3. I think he basically didn't realize that we're going to be transposing to the Gligorich variation, where now black gets a very favorable version of all this, because after f3, black gets to play d5, which is only possible, of course, because the bishop on e3 is hanging. And hey, Grandmaster Gary in the chat. Hey Gary, how you doing? a lot of interesting comments in the chat there. Okay, anyway, so I was basically happy to get this, and my opponent here started spending some time. So I wasn't sure if he was just totally unfamiliar with the position, or if he realized that we had transposed and now he's trying to figure out what to do. But basically, this was not part of his main repertoire. I'm pretty sure of that, and so it was definitely a success to get this in the opening. So he goes c takes d5. This is the main move. I play knight takes d5 because it's basically useful for black to trade off these knights and kind of open up the bishop. So knight takes d5, c takes d5, and queen b3. Okay, I think this is a very logical move. If I now take on e4, then white has like bishop c4 ideas, or maybe rook a d1 first. And basically this is not really a pawn that black often wants to be grabbing. Instead, knight c6 is a better move, just developing, hitting the knight on d4. If white trades on c6 here, then after b takes c6, I think structurally black is doing pretty well here. And the bishop on g7 is good. I just want to get my bishop out and play like rook b8 and target the b2 pawn. And it's still very awkward for white with the two bishops kind of hanging on the e-file. So instead he went rook a d1. I played bishop e5. And this is basically where my prep kind of ended. I knew this position was like supposed to be okay for black. I think the engine gives equality here, or maybe even starts like slightly preferring black. White definitely has to be careful, because with this move bishop e5, I'm actually trying to play queen h4, which is potentially a very, very serious threat. And hey, Esoteric gifting a sub to Gary. That's very nice of you. Thank you. And if I get this queen h4, then it's going to be really dangerous for white, because like g3, I'm going to sack on g3. The queen is going to get to g3, king h1, rook to e5, or maybe knight e5. It feels very, very dangerous for white there. So white definitely has to deal with this threat. He decided to play knight takes c6, b takes c6, and then f4. I should point out, if the immediate f4 was played, then black could take on d4, and then just grab this pawn on e4. And I think black should be able to get away with this pretty comfortably. Okay, Warnacki asks, weren't you concerned with the g8 a2 diagonal with the queen on b3? A little bit, yeah. I mean, this is definitely like an idea that white is trying to use. So it's for that main reason that I'm not going to be playing d takes e4. Well, now the rook is lined up against the queen, so it's kind of like multiple reasons at this point. But yeah, allowing bishop c4 in this kind of position would be really, really annoying. But for the moment, there's not much white can do. Like, this pawn on d5 cannot be taken because black takes on d4. And then after bishop d4, we are going to be taking the bishop on e2. There's also like queen h4 somewhere, and yeah, basically a lot of weaknesses in white's position. Okay, so I think he played it pretty normally. He takes, he goes f4, and I think this is probably my first big think of the game. The main move I was considering here after f4 is, of course, rook b8, just gaining this tempo on the queen. But I wasn't exactly sure what's going on after queen a4, let's say bishop takes b2, and queen takes c6. This just looked really really unclear to me. I also thought about rook takes b2 here, and then after f takes e5, rook takes e2, and I wasn't sure about this position either, because it just like looked very scary to give up the dark squared bishop, and now I have this like random rook on e2 that might be hanging in some lines. So I don't know. I never checked this line with the engine. Let's see what the stockfish on Lichess says. I guess it says it's basically okay for black. Yeah, I think when I checked after the game, the engine was giving rook b8, then queen a4, and yeah, bishop takes b2 was given as the main move. But rook takes b2, yeah, it definitely doesn't feel super clear. Okay, I guess he takes on a7 and defends the bishop. Black plays like bishop e6 would be most natural. And it looks like things are apparently about equal. Although from a practical point of view, I'm really not sure which side I would take, because white always has like bishop h6 ideas. My bishop is pretty solid on e6, so I don't know, maybe I would still take black. But yeah, I don't think my winning chances would be so great there. And then bishop takes b2, queen takes c6. I didn't see this move d4 here, or at least I didn't think it would be such a useful move for black, because I'm not even threatening to take the bishop, and all I'm doing is like blocking my bishop from the diagonal. So this move really didn't occur to me during the game. Maybe the idea is that I'm actually threatening bishop b7 here and like taking the e4 pawn, but it's kind of it's a very concrete line that, yeah, I just wasn't really in the mood to calculate, I guess. So I end up going for bishop c7, because rook b8 it just didn't look clear to me. But my idea with this move is that, okay, I'm gonna get rook b8 next move. E takes d5 is currently not very good because I have this rook takes e3 trick, and then bishop b6, rook d4, and I kind of just assumed this was winning for black. I didn't really calculate much further here, just because it's gonna take forever for white to unpin, and I just need a couple moves to like get everything into the game and win this rook. I assume this is winning. I'll check again. Yeah, queen takes d5, rook fd1, bishop e6. Okay, white has to get out of the pin somehow, and then black can just start grabbing pawns, and yeah, I guess I'm winning some material here. Maybe not completely over, but clearly no good for white. Okay, so instead he goes bishop f3, which to me looked quite logical. I threw in rook to b8, queen c2, and here I play bishop b6. Wasn't really sure what else to do here, because he does kind of want to take on c6, and then take on d5. And I was really considering this move for a while, with idea to just get out of the pin. So I'm threatening rook takes b2, and I'm also threatening d takes e4, and I'm defending on c6. But of course I didn't like e5, and I was really trying to make this work for a while, rook takes e5, because I thought, okay, take, I'm hitting h2 and I'm hitting the bishop. I'm not sure if it's really enough, but some line like this, for example, I feel like would be pretty dangerous for white. Maybe bishop a6 here, or maybe bishop g3 check first. I wasn't really sure, but the main issue I was having was not this exactly, but rather after rook takes e5, if white just goes bishop d4. This was the move I couldn't figure out. And I think I have to play queen takes f4. Nothing else really screams out at me. And then, okay, if white had to take on e5 and I could just play this position, then this would be great for black, because I think I just have huge compensation for the exchange. Like dark squared bishop, the rook is active, I'm getting this bishop out, the pawns are going to be like pushing very quickly. So this would be a dream, but instead of bishop takes e5, bishop takes d5. This one was really bothering me. Because, okay, my first idea was to take here and try to give a beautiful checkmate, but of course it just doesn't work. The king gets out. But if not that, then I wasn't sure what else I could do here, because the f7 pawn is hanging, and that just looks... I think white's counterplay just looks much stronger. So yeah, I don't think I checked either of these lines with the engine. I'd be curious to see what's going on here. Apparently after rook e1, wow, what a move. Apparently black is kind of okay here, but this isn't really what I wanted, since I was trying to play for a win, so I'm not sure if equality would be good enough. Okay, but basically e5, let's see, rook e5, and okay, if white takes, okay, I think this one I kind of evaluated correctly, that black is at least fine here. So I would probably be happy to play this position. Bishop takes a7 is not a move I considered at all, to be honest, because I mean, grabbing these pawns is always never going to work out for white, but fair enough, the computer wants to grab some material. And then bishop d4, queen takes f4. What's going on here? Yeah, it looks like either g3 or bishop takes d5, and then I would have to find rook e1 to stay alive here. Takes on f7, king f8, takes on e1, and okay, if white wants to play for the win, he has to play king e2 here, allow bishop g4 check. So it feels very risky for white, but it looks like black is not really playing for more than a perpetual here. So definitely good that I avoided this. Yeah, easy moves, Gary, exactly. Okay, so I played bishop b6. My idea here was actually more positional, or at least I'm just trying to play against some weaknesses in the position. If I trade off the dark square bishops, then I think white has to white is going to have to get very passive very quickly, just defending all of their pawns. Hey, Chess Poems, thanks for the bits, and hey, Plu Crew, thanks for checking out the stream. Okay, so here I think Eugene played a good move, bishop f2, and he's just keeping the tension. So if I take on f2, he can take with the queen and kind of keep his eye on this diagonal, which I think is pretty important. And I think I already have to be a little bit careful about just allowing like dead equality. Like if I just take on f2 and go queen b6, then actually I'm not even sure I equalize here. I thought like queen takes, rook takes, white takes on d5, cd5, and then b3, important move. So securing this weakness, but leaving me with an Isolani, and yeah, I thought maybe black is equal here, but there's no way I'm going to be better in this kind of endgame. So I ended up playing d4, and I mean, I think it worked out in the game, and it's a very ambitious move. I mean, I'm trying to just get my pawns rolling with bishop a6. And then c4 and d3 and so on. But objectively, I guess this move was not so good. Because what white should have done is play bishop e2. And this is actually a really strong move. I didn't consider it during the game. I'm not sure if my opponent did. But the idea is to just take over this diagonal, put the bishop on c4, and then play like b3 to just cement the bishop. And white will have like a very beautiful blockade on the light squares. And apparently white is better, according to the engine. So yeah, I was surprised to find out about this, but interesting idea for sure. Kind of reminds me of Game 6 of the Fischer-Spassky match, if you guys remember what I'm talking about. Fischer just planted this bishop on c4 and Queen's Gambit declined, cemented it with b3. I think the pawn structure was very similar. And it was like bishop versus knight, and yeah, this bishop was just a fantastic piece the entire game. Okay, so yeah, objectively this move was dubious, but it does end up working out because white played b4, which I think is very logical, like stopping me from connecting my pawns with c5, but it does allow me to kind of snag the initiative with bishop a6. So this is objectively the problem. Okay, Esoteric is making fun of me about saying Game 6 and expecting people to know what I'm talking about. But no, actually, I think that's one of the only games that I would recognize based on the number alone. It is a very famous game. At the end, Spassky, like after Fischer won, Spassky stood up and like applauded him along with the rest of the audience, which was quite an interesting moment that would probably never happen today. But yeah, I think if you Google it, it's like it should come up. It is not in the Fischer book because my 60 memorable games was written, I think, before the match and before the candidates tournament. So it was written in like sometime in the 60s. So he hadn't played it yet. Okay, so actually after bishop a6, white now has some concrete problems. Because if rook fe1, my idea here was to push d3 and just get this pawn moving. And then I wasn't sure what to do after queen d2, bishop takes f2, queen takes f2. And here I didn't know if I could really go for this, but apparently after rook takes b4, queen takes a7, I have this move rook b6. That's very strong. And the threat is to just go rook e7 and like trap the queen. So I didn't notice this during the game. I just assumed after rook fe1, d3, queen d2, I would just figure it out from here because it's clear that, okay, this pawn is going to be kind of a useful asset for black, and then how I continue from here, it just depends on what I calculate. I think I was maybe thinking about queen b6 here as well. But yeah, this rook b4, rook b6 is a nice idea. But instead, he actually quickly played bishop e2, which I think makes sense because he didn't want to allow d3. But now I'm able to trade off these bishops, and I just go queen d6 with a pretty nice double attack, just two pawns hanging. Objectively, I felt like black is now definitely playing for the advantage because I might be able to just grab a pawn. But it's not so easy because he plays a3. I grab on f4. Bishop g3 was not possible because of queen e3 check, and after queen takes, d takes. He can't take the rook in view of e2, but otherwise this pawn is just really strong anyway, so I'm just going to play rook b d8 next move, or rook takes e4 soon, and just a really bad endgame for white. No GM norms for me. I haven't even been close. I think my best performance has been like 2505 or something, and you need 2600 for the GM norm. So it's a ways away. It's an uphill battle for sure. So instead, he played bishop takes d4, and now I could play queen takes e4 here, and win a pawn this way. I expected we would get a queen trade, bishop takes b6. I think I take with the rook, and then after rook d7, I thought white had really good drawing chances here in this position because he has a lot of counterplay. If I push f5, then my king is exposed and he can just activate his rooks very quickly. So instead, what I decided to do is to go rook takes e4, which is a little bit harder to calculate because here it's like there's a lot more pieces that are hanging. But I kind of was able to figure out that the only real difference is that after white takes my queen and I take on e2, then we essentially get the same endgame, except instead of my rook being on e4, my rook is on e2. And I thought this was actually a pretty valuable difference for me, because now I can set up my own threats against white's second rank. My idea is to either push like c5 and try to open the b file, or get rook a8, rook takes a3, and then rook a2. And yeah, I thought my winning chances here are quite reasonable. Objectively, it is drawn with best play. But I think that was after the move rook to d7, which surprisingly white didn't play. I'm not sure exactly what he didn't like. Based on the game, I think he didn't know what to do after f5. And I was probably going to make this move. And yeah, it isn't so obvious what white should do here. I think I was expecting like g4. And I believe I was calculating this line. Rook a8, g takes f5, rook takes a3. F takes g6. I give a check, rook f1. And no, this wasn't it. Oh, here I just recapture. This was the idea. H takes G. With the point being that white doesn't have any useful checks. My king is just getting out, but my rooks are still threatening to give a check, and he's not really in time to play rook f7 because I can force him to go back and then switch to the second rank. Very useful trick to know in these types of rook endgames. Because, yeah, again, his checks don't really make a difference, but my rooks are going to be much stronger. And hey, Julian in the chat. What's up? So, I don't know. Maybe he didn't like something similar. The engine gives a draw after rook d7, f5, rook h4, which I thought I would just play h5 and that this is nothing for white. But then after rook back to d4, then actually white does get some counterplay with rook d6. So yeah, apparently this is holding for white. Oh yeah, Plu Crew asked the question, would I think it's easier to play for a win with both rooks or just one pair of rooks? Honestly, it's a very important question, and usually you have to think about this question during the game, because sometimes it's just easier whether or not you have one rook or two. I think the general rule is, well, basically, if you have the initiative, you should keep both rooks on the board. If you don't have the initiative, you should try to trade rooks. So in this case, I think I would definitely look for a rook trade, because white is kind of the one that's getting the two rooks into play faster. And with one rook's off the board, then of course king safety is no longer a concern. The king can just defend itself, and then your rook is free to be a lot more active. So usually single rook endgames are kind of better from a technical point of view, because you're kind of in more control. But there are a lot of cases where you're the one with the active rooks, and then of course you'd prefer not to trade rooks because you can still create threats with your two rooks on the second rank. So white played rook f6, and I think this was think this was kind of a mistake, because now I played rook a8. And if he takes on c6, I take on a3, and then he can take on b6, but I'll get rook a2. So I'm very happy to give back my extra pawn, but I'm of course seizing the second rank, and the game is basically over. So instead he went rook d3. So he's kind of slowing down already, because now he's defending this one, and he didn't go rook d7, because if he goes rook d7, I just take on a3, and he can take on f7 either way he wants, but the point is I'm still going to be able to give him a check, and then go back to the second rank. And of course he can't really offer a trade of rooks here, because I'm up a pawn. So the fact that he had to play rook d3 I felt like was a good sign. I played rook c2. So now I'm just defending the pawn, so he can never take, but I also want to maybe switch to rook e8 and go rook e2. Hey, thanks for the follow there. And here he goes h4, which I think was a really good try, because now he's trying to advance the pawn and push it all the way to h6. Okay, so here I think I was considering h5, but eventually I just decided to start with rook a7. Just like, okay, take the second rank, or the 7th rank, so white's rook is not showing up on d7, and just trying to consolidate, maybe king g7 at some point, and so on. But then he surprises me with b5. I was definitely not expecting to see this move. And at this point we're actually both approaching time trouble. So I think I want to say we're both under 10 minutes here, with 10 moves to go before the time control, and we get 30 extra minutes. Maybe even less than 10 minutes. Actually, I think at this point we were both under 5 minutes, to be honest. So I didn't have a lot of time to calculate here, but I decided to take. Rook takes b6, and I played rook a4, just going after the h-pawn. h5. And here I basically burned all of my time trying to calculate this move rook to g4. Because it kind of looks like it's almost a winning move. If I can take here, then the game is kind of over. If white goes g3, then the second rank is open again. I can go rook e4 and already start to create threats. But the problem was that, of course, white can go h6 here. And just get this pawn on h6. Now my king is threatening to get mated, or threatened to get mated. And yeah, this looked very scary for me, because if I take, the king just can walk away, and I don't really have any good checks. I mean, I can repeat moves, but I'm still playing for a win, so a draw is not great. Because after check, yeah, king goes to f1, and so I can't put the rook on e8. If I could force him to go to d1, then at the worst case I can just go rook e8 here, and then very slowly pick up this pawn, play rook f8 if I need to, and black will win the game. But of course the problem is king f1. And yeah, I just couldn't figure out this move king f8, but this is like, this move wins for black. Really not easy to see this. Like, white goes rook d7 and threatens checkmate again. And I think black gives check front with this rook, king moves to g1, and then rook goes to like f5. And now this rook can come back to e8 and defend against the mate. So yeah, there's like 5-6 moves at this point, and I had like 3-4 minutes on my clock, so I felt like this should be winning, but you know, you just worry, like if you miss one idea, you're just gonna get mated. And so I didn't really think it was worth taking a risk. So I decided to just take on h5. Just take the pawn. Now I'm not getting mated. I might not win the game, but I'm definitely not getting mated. But okay, so now I'm 2 pawns up. And if white goes rook takes b5, then I'm definitely going rook g4 here. And now I think when I take on on g2, I think it's pretty bad for white. Because, well here, okay, it's definitely a case where we want to keep both rooks on the board. With one pair of rooks, the endgame is drawish, but with two, then I think, okay, we can create mating chances and should be good for black. Hey, Gold Dust Tori in the chat. Welcome. So instead, he played rook g3 check. Yeah, Julian, I mean, it's like a theoretical draw, the H and F with one rook. But I think in practice, it's winning more than 50% of the time. I don't know for sure, but I would bet, like, if you took all the games that reach that endgame, it probably wins more than 50%. So I think in practical terms, it's like, it's hard to hold. But objectively, yeah, it's a dead draw, supposedly. Okay, instead so rook g3 check, I go rook g4. And white is forced to take on g4, h takes g4, rook takes b5. So now the situation is kind of clarified a bit. I have 3 versus 1 on the king side, white has this pass pawn on the queen side. And I thought my winning chances here were actually very good. I mean, if I can just get all the pawns defended, then having 2 extra pawns is usually winning, you know, when it's on one side of the board. Eventually I'll get maybe 2 connected passers, and then that'll be an easy win. And white's a pawn is very easy to control, because I just get behind it and it's not really going to go very far. But okay, immediate threat is rook g5 check, so I played f6. White played king h2, which I think is a very good move, because otherwise g3 would have been a big problem. I played rook c3, cutting the king and also hitting the pawn. And here he goes a4. I was actually surprised by this move, because when I was calculating, I didn't have much time, because this is like move 37, so I think we both have just a few minutes here. To me, I actually didn't see what I'm going to do against rook b4. So just hitting the pawn, if I go h5, he latches onto this other pawn. And I have no way of defending this one. Any trade of pawns is just going to be a draw, because 2 versus 1 is very easy to hold. So I have to go like h4, rook b4. No way to defend the pawn other than like rook g3. But rook g3, I mean, like, this is never going to work. White just pushes a4, and I mean, the pawn is just going to be running. Instead, if I go f5, then rook b5. And hitting this pawn, f4 is rook g5 check, and then finally taking these pawns. Oh, king g7 and f5. Let's look at that. Maybe. Let's see, rook b4, rook g3. A4, king g7. A5, F5. Yeah, if like A6 here, I think this is now winning for black. But yeah, maybe rook A4. Hey, one-legged parrot with the move. Let's see. I have to go back. And usually this is not easy to win, if at all. It's probably very hard to win. Yeah, rook a6. It's just like both pieces are cut. The pawns look great, but yeah, what to do? Maybe black should be careful not to lose. Okay, so this one is maybe just barely not working. Yeah, rook on g3 is just way too awkward. So I didn't really calculate this out during the game, but to me it looked like I don't have a great way of defending the pawn, since f5, again, rook b5. But instead he goes a4. So now black to play. This is the moment where I kind of missed my chance. And yeah, thankfully the move isn't given away on the stream, so that's good. But yeah, what do you guys think I should do here? I'll let you you guys in the chat try to figure out black to play, how to maximize our winning chances. Okay, Ornaki says h5, Plukru says king g7, Esoteric also likes king g7. Jokey asking about the tournament standings. I don't know if there's a place online, unfortunately. But yeah, I'll have to I'll try to figure that out for the next stream, because yeah, I don't know where I would post, or where the player list is even posted. Okay, so Gary likes rook a3. And yeah, I need 7 points out of 9 for the GM norm. So after these first 4 games, I'm on 2 out of 4. So basically, I need 5 out of 5 in the following games. Okay, so I played rook to c4, which is not good. What I should have done was play king g7. So those of you that suggested king g7, good instincts. At this point, I actually remember this moment because we've been in time trouble for a little while, and yeah, my brain was like no longer calculating. My idea with rook c4 was basically I defend my pawn. So that's good. I attack white's pawn, so that's good, and that was it. That was about the extent of my thinking. Had I done just like a little bit of calculation here, like maybe 10-15 seconds, I think intuitively I would have realized that king g7, it actually it keeps all the pawns defended, because now if rook b4, we can just go f5, and after rook b5, king g6. I'm defending the pawns. Then I can go rook a3 whenever I need to. And basically this looks winning. I don't think I analyzed it until the very end, but it's pretty good. I mean, the king is just moving up, the pawns move up. At a certain point, white's king is either going to get mated on the back rank, or black will play h3 with the rook on a2, and that should be winning. White's pawn is very hard to advance past a6, because the rook is just not so useful. And yeah, basically it's a win for black. So that was kind of a shame to miss, because yeah, it's not a hard move, and it's very intuitive because we always want to just get our king in. But I think I was confused because on the previous move, I was expecting white to go rook b4 here, and I thought it would be a draw. And then when he didn't play rook b4, I felt like some relief. And then I just instinctively wanted to take the 4th rank, which is not right. And as I think people have pointed out in the chat, it also lets white's king out, which is actually the real problem with this move, is that now white's king can actually get active. Hey Bazoo, no table tennis yet. I've been taking a break with some chess. And so on. Oh, why is rook a3 wrong? Let's see. I think white can go rook b4 again. And I don't think black is holding the pawns here. Yeah, h5, rook b5. g3 check. Rook takes a4. Just take on h5, right? Oh, then if h4, then rook b4, and I think it's a draw. We can just check. I don't really know, 100% sure. Okay, apparently even rook b7 is a draw. Rook takes a4, king g3, which is amazing. but I guess black just has no way to improve here, which is really funny. 2 pawns up. Doesn't matter. Yeah, Gary, we gotta study these endgames sometime. Like, how is this possible, right? But okay, so I want to wrap up the game here. Actually, it does get a little bit interesting. So a5. Now I play king g7, king g3, king g6. So I'm able to hold on to my pawns, but the problem is the king gets super active for white, and my pawns basically get fixed. So rook a4, he pushes a6. Now, of course, if I take, king takes, this is a pretty easy draw for white. So h5 and a7. And I actually thought I was winning here for a moment, because if I take on a7, white can go rook takes h5, and then I have rook a2, where I'm threatening to win a second pawn, and white can't play king takes g4 because of rook a4 check. So that looked good to me. So I took on a7, but instead, what can white play here? What do you guys think? White has a much better way to play the position. Bazu says stalemate, but you can't just beg for a stalemate, you know. That's not how chess works. Okay, but yeah, he figured it out. Figured out the idea. Yeah, g3. Nice move. And the point is, after the obvious rook a1, white will go rook b1. And like rook a2, rook b2. And draw. So yeah, after g3, it's basically over. White just has too many stalemates. I kept trying rook e7, rook e5, rook f7. I mean, now he could already even take on h5, but instead he goes rook e4. I think looking for f5, rook takes g4, which would be a nice way to finish. Either way, I take back the pawn. And yeah, basically it's a drawn position. Yeah, Gary, I didn't see g3 until he played it. Let's see. Could I go king f7? Yeah, I think I can try this, but let's say, oh, after rook f5. After rook e5. Oh. Yeah, but then I think just rook takes here. And I think it's yeah, just going to be drawn. Oh, hey, Warnacki, sorry, I missed your suggestion. Let's go back. So basically the game was drawn after this. I got my king out, but white finally took on h5, and then this position is just impossible to win. White's king is too active. And yeah, I mean, even if the king was on g2, it'd be an easy draw for white.